thanks for the honour of inviting me to speak to you today. I thought I'd structure my remarks as follows: to give you an idea of the genesis of the white paper. Mercifully, I won't take you through the detail of the white paper, but I know that there's a special interest in the implementation of it, how we're going about it, and then perhaps some gazing into the future about the sorts of industries where we think that we can have a particular advantage in the Asian century. As to its genesis, it came from discussions that I had been having with Prime Minister Julia Gillard as a former economic advisor to Bob Hawke. I was able to witness the diplomatic work that he was doing, building itself on the work that Gough Whitlam had done all those years, indeed 40 years ago, in officially recognising the People's Republic of China, something he said he would do in opposition if he were elected, and he did that almost immediately. The Chinese have never forgotten that, and Bob began this process of quite long discussions with Chinese leadership, often conducted behind closed doors with no one or just one person extra each side in those discussions. Often that one person was Professor Ross Garnaut, who was my PhD thesis supervisor, so you begin to see the connections. And I know Deng Xiaoping was explaining to Bob that China would be opening up, that following the 1949 creation of the People's Republic of China under a communist regime, they recognised that they would need to build strength out of engaging with the world commercially. This was great news for Bob Hawke, and he foresaw the Asian century built on those conversations. He understood, along with Paul Keating, that if we were to take full advantage of the opportunities that would be available almost 20 years later, that we ourselves had to become an open, competitive economy. And therefore the purpose and the great endeavour of domestic economic reform was launched. And that involved tearing down our own trade barriers unilaterally, because it was judged to be in the best interests of the Australian community, including Australian business. It involved liberalising, deregulating the financial sector, which to that point had been heavily regulated, including, of course, the floating of the dollar. And it also involved progressive labour market reform, and later under Paul Keating's stewardship, national competition policy to expose those state-owned enterprises in Australia to the sorts of rigours that private enterprises had been exposed to as a result of earlier reforms. So through that process, we did create an open, competitive economy. Our confidence in the capacity of business to respond to those challenges was vindicated, and there has been, built on that, 21 years of recession-free economic growth. So in the conversations with Prime Minister Gillard, I put the proposition that we now, having effected that first major post-war economic transformation, had an obligation to bring about a great post-war economic transformation. And this was based on a realisation that the mining boom, as valuable as it is, could not, over a very long period, sustain the growth in national incomes that the Australian people would expect. We're very confident about the mining boom. Even the investment stage of the mining boom has not peaked, and investment as a share of gross domestic product is already at 50-year highs. This is pretty spectacular stuff. So the price boom has probably passed, and we know that mineral prices are unlikely to rise again to the levels that they had achieved before the global financial crisis. But certainly the investment boom is yet to peak. It will, according to most experts, probably this year, if not early next year. But the investment is there for a good reason, and that's production. So then there follows the production boom. Nevertheless, that is not going to, of itself, be enough to meet the aspirations of the Australian people for continuing rises in income per person. And that's why we need the second great economic transformation, which is to diversify our economy, to take advantage of the changes that are occurring in Asia compared with those that we foresaw 20 or more years ago. What are those changes? It will continue to be a region hungry for resources, there's no doubt about that. But by 2030, there'll be 3 billion middle-class customers in Asia, and they won't be demanding just iron ore, they'll be demanding a vast array of sophisticated products and services. This is not China alone. If you add up all of the countries in the region that are growing strongly, including, but not limited to, China, India, Indonesia, Korea, and remember too that the ASEANs are growing strongly, 10 nations there doing very well, and even Japan, not growing, but still about the 3rd largest economy in the world. So, we are at the right place at the right time in the Asian region in the Asian century. Some people say, well, lucky you, lucky you. Well, as Arnold Palmer once said, funny thing, the more I practice, the luckier I get. And the fact is that this development was foreseen, and the policies of diplomatic engagement and domestic economic reform have helped put us in the right place at the right time, now to bring around about that second great economic transformation. What do we need to do domestically? Well, the truth is, productivity growth is the source of 80% of the increase in per capita GDP, measured living standards in this country over the last 40 years. We've had an injection of income from overseas associated with those very high prices from the mining boom. We can't rely on that forever. So we need to revert to productivity growth as the basic source of increases in national income as achieved through increasing competitiveness through our businesses as they become more productive. A rather sad tale is that over the period from 2000 through to about 2010, productivity growth in Australia was low, and by one measure, so-called multi-factor productivity growth, turned negative in 2004. So 6 years later, we're actually less productive than we were in 2004. This government has set out a productivity raising reform agenda to effect that second great economic transformation. And we asked ourselves, what are the major sources of productivity growth in a modern economy in the 21st century? We don't get to open up the economy a second time. As Paul Keating once said, you push the door open, you can't push it open again. We already have the model and the practice of an open competitive economy, so we need to do new policies to achieve a lift in productivity growth. In the 21st century, in a modern economy, the predominant source of productivity growth is education and training, of course, so that we've got not only kids going to university, making sure they finish year 12, but also going on alternatively to a vocational education. Our history in education has been left wanting. We have in Australia an education profile such that on average we do okay. We've obviously got some excellent children, but we have what's called a long tail of disadvantage and underperformance. And so the centrepiece of what we're seeking to do through the white paper in the Asian century is to develop a fully reformed school education system. You might have heard of Mr. David Gonski, and the teachers' unions are going around saying, I give a Gonski. Well, most people don't know who David Gonski is, but they will know that we are prepared not only to invest heavily in education reform on a needs-based funding model, but the other reforms that are essential there to give teachers more autonomy so that they can make decisions at the local level. So a package of reforms in both education and training. This country too has effectively been starved of infrastructure investment through pretty much the same period, or even going back a little earlier, when states in particular, with the collapse of state banks, basically made the decision that debt is inherently bad politically. So they decided that the politics of debt were very bad, and so states themselves underinvested in infrastructure in this country, and the Commonwealth of Australia under the previous government regarded infrastructure investment as being a state responsibility. So we had very, very little effective infrastructure investment over that decade. The third area, of course, is tax reform. If we can lift participation, if we can give people more incentive, travelling of the tax-free threshold from $6,000 to $18,200 certainly does that, then that's important. Removing unnecessary regulation is very important. We've been doing that with 27 areas of business regulation that I oversaw in a different capacity as Minister assisting on deregulation and competition policy. But I've left out another one that starts with I, and I want to spend a little time on that, and that's innovation. We cannot be competitive as a low-skilled, low-wage country, nor should we want to be. Our advantage when you look at the Asian century is high-skilled, high-wage, with large doses of embedded innovation. And that's why we released the innovation statement on Sunday. It is a way of kick-starting again a culture in this country, which we have sitting there basically, but it needs some real encouragement so that we are looking to the industries of the future, not just at the industries of the past. And that means looking to our strengths. What are our strengths in the Asian region, in the Asian century? I just want to go through two or three, and you'll see why we've gone down this particular path. We have a reputation here based on an abundance of land as a clean, green producer of premium agricultural products. Now, if you've got 3 billion middle-class customers, it doesn't take long to work out what they want, and that is premium processed foods, fresh and processed foods. And to be truthful, money is not an object. People in the region are becoming fabulously wealthy in very large numbers, and they'll pay premium prices for premium produce. This is right up our alley, because we're not going to have farmers on low incomes, farm workers on low incomes, but we have that well-deserved reputation. No foot and mouth disease, no mad cow disease, no mix-ups in the production of baby food such that poisons end up in the baby food. Everyone looks to two countries from the region who are capable of doing this: New Zealand, who are doing it very well, and Australia. You know that here in Victoria, milk producers are already getting their product flown, cold, fresh, into the region. We can make money selling fresh milk into Asia, and it is likely that there will be regular flights of fresh milk in packs about so big that are all packed into refrigerated planes just sold straight into China. Imagine what we do if we add value to that. Our premium quality cheeses, our premium infant formula, and of course our great wines. These are just examples of what the future holds for us if we get the production and the logistics right, if we get the transport right. So that's an area of particular strength. If you look at another attribute that we have, which we've acquired, such as that reputation for clean, green produce, it is this, that our legal system is seen to be honest and transparent. That's a good thing. Why? Because people like the idea of investing here in Australia to supply goods and services into the region. When people wonder why the Australian dollar is stubbornly high, it's because money continues to pour into this country to invest, because they see investing in Australia as having a stake in China in particular, but with our legal system, That's long-term investment, and then there's short-term investment, because foreign investors and money market operators see Australia as AAA rated by all international rating agencies. They see us as a safe haven currency now, like the US dollar. And so they are putting their money here into Australia, and that's why the exchange rate is high. It is actually a vote of confidence in the Australian economy. That's a great attribute. Another attribute is our education system. Not only the quality of our universities, but the fact that many leaders and senior decision makers in Asia have directly been educated here, and they are still sending to this day their children to be educated here. They like Australia. People in the region like Australia. Let's not underestimate the value of that. Another acquired attribute, 1 million Australians speak Asian languages. Now, all of those wonderful Australians are here before our eyes. Here in the Asian century, they have an attribute that's extremely highly valued. So that's to our advantage. Another advantage, not to be underestimated, is that we're in the same time zone. So business can be conducted during the day, or just with a little bit of overlap into the evening or early morning. And again, parents, when they send their kids to a particular country, like the idea of being able to talk to their kids pretty much at the same time of day. The US and Europe have a disadvantage there. I could go on, but the fact is that we have a set of natural and acquired attributes that give us an indication of where we can steer this second great economic transformation. And so I want to finish really by saying that an area that I think we should be really thinking seriously about is the one that I discussed. It's one of many, but we have an opportunity to feed our region at a time when we are going to be increasing the world's population by 2050 from 7 billion to 9.3 billion people. That has ecological implications, it has implications for humanity, and here we are in Australia with the capacity to make a great contribution to that big humanitarian task. However, we cannot do it without foreign investment. And it is folly to think that we can just say to our superannuation funds, well, come on, roll your sleeves up and do this, we only want Australian investment. It's so absurd. But that's what Barnaby Joyce is saying on behalf of the Nationals, and as the infrastructure shadow minister, and also as the shadow minister who was charged with developing one of the documents that was released recently. Frankly, it is absurd. I think it is humiliating to think that we're so stupid as a country that we would believe that we can do this without foreign investment. I was reading in the paper just 2 days ago that one of the biggest superannuation funds in the world from Canada is coming here to look exactly at those opportunities. Not to sell food to Canada, to sell food to our own region. So I think that is a classic example of thinking about future industries, and the innovation statement that was released on Sunday hones directly in to that food production manufacturing endeavour that we think offers so much potential. The final area that I think that without extending my talk for too long, that there's obviously an advantage, and that is participating in what are called regional value chains. We should not be downcast about manufacturing in this country. The Prime Minister launched the innovation statement with Greg Conway at Boeing. Boeing is using CSIRO expertise intersecting with commercial realities to produce important components for the Dreamliner that is being assembled in Seattle. This is a classic case of us not saying that we have a comparative advantage in producing Dreamliner aircraft, but that we have an advantage in some aspects of the supply chain or the value chain that leads to the final product called the Dreamliner. We do that here in Australia based on our scientific expertise and the way that it interacts with business. That's where we can build our strengths. That's how we can participate through manufacturing and through our services, bundling them together into the production of final goods for consumption within Asia and beyond. That means that it's not just manufacturing, it's our services such as logistics, such as legal services, such as design, such as marketing. All of those get bundled into these so-called regional supply chains as we participate, not necessarily, as I say, in the production of a final good, but in a process within the region that allows everyone to get some value out of it. I could complete this presentation with a slightly mechanical coverage of the things that we've done since the white paper. It's probably better if someone who's really interested in that asks me a question and I'll answer that question. But I think having, to use Paul Keating's terminology, hopefully created the large canvas, we can fill in the final and finer detailed brushstrokes a little bit later. But that's the genesis, that's the second great economic transformation. These are the opportunities, and I think if we get this right, through the implementation of the Asian Century White Paper, we can offer young people in this country a fantastic array of rewarding career opportunities. That's what government should do, but we can only do it with your support. Thanks very much.